Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Jednick, and I'm the Coordinator of Digital Initiatives here at the San Jose State Writing Center. Welcome to our series of faculty collaborations for writing between the Writing Center, WAC, and the Center for Faculty Development. We have our guest here, and I'm going to have her introduce herself as we begin to talk a little bit about some goal setting and the writing process.
Hi, everyone. My name is Magdalena Barrera. I'm Professor and Chair of Chicana and Chicano Studies.
Can you talk a little bit about your writing process? What sort of goal setting do you do before beginning a project?
I think this is such an important question, and there are probably three key things that I try to do when I'm beginning a new writing project. One is to always start by creating a mission statement for myself to help keep myself on track. That really helps to keep me out of the rabbit hole of a literature review when you start to feel like, oh, now I have to become an expert in this area and I want to touch a little bit on this and now I have to read all of this material. So having that mission statement printed out somewhere or at the start of my journal just keeps me very grounded. And I also need the reminder that I don't have to know all the answers to a given topic, but I'm just aiming to contribute one particular slice to a scholarly discussion. And that mission statement keeps it very focused and on track. A second thing that I do is to start writing right away. Start writing by beginning with what I already know about the topic, other things that I've read, projects I've worked on, things that maybe from my teaching that incorporate into this topic. I think it's important to avoid feeling like, oh, I need to do a bunch of reading. There's always that lure of just one more article is what I'm going to need, and then I'll be ready to start writing. You have to write from the beginning. And just jumping right in with what do I currently know is something that really helps me do that. I also like to use a program called Scrivener to break my project, a bigger project, into smaller sections, identify word count targets, target page numbers for the different sections, sketch out the different elements and notes. And I find that's a really useful program for keeping all those different bits all in one place, one file for that document. And then I really try to schedule specific writing blocks most weekdays and identify very particular goals for each of those blocks. And this was something that was really an important shift from my early days as a professor to what I know to do now. I used to just say, oh, on Tuesday morning, I'm going to work on my writing. But that is so broad and amorphous and too big to tackle. I didn't even know what I was really going to be working on. So now I know to write myself a note saying, okay, Tuesday morning, I'm going to work on fleshing out the introduction, or I'm going to add one final paragraph to the section on the history of the program, etc. So creating these very specific concrete goals enables me to get started and also track my progress as I'm making my way through a piece.
What sort of advice would you like to give to an academic on the tenure track who feels a lot of pressure to continually publish? We always hear that sense of pressure for especially early academics. Like, what would you advise to help them?
I think looking back on my own experience, I can recognize now the importance of finding personal meaning and fulfillment in the day-to-day act of struggling to write. And this is an idea that comes from a writer, an academic named Donald Hall. I'm going to forget the name of his work, but I find it it was really helpful to me early on in my tenure track years. But part of what he says is that the writing process can be very anticlimactic because we struggle through working with our drafts. By the time we finally submit it, we go through the revision process with the journal. When it's finally out in print, you're already mentally onto the next project or working on the next big thing that you're working on. And it's almost too late to celebrate at that point. So another aspect of this is you can't let acceptance from others, in other words, the publication process itself, define your worth as a scholar, which is not to say that you can afford to dismiss or ignore critical or uncomfortable feedback, right? That's meant to improve your particular piece, but rather it's understanding that to write is to think, and you're on a part of a much bigger journey to understand topics that are important to you. So I think it's really a matter of remembering what is it that you want to write about and why. Who are you writing for? What does this really matter? Why does this need to be out in the world? And I think that's staying grounded in that is what gives you that motivation to open your laptop the next day and like take another crack at the very difficult work of taking ideas from your brain, through your fingertips, into a format that other people can engage with and think about. And I also had to let go of the pressure that I'm here to like revolutionize my field, because that's a lot of pressure too. It's like, I don't need to be the most amazing person who ever talked about X, Y, or Z, right? I just want to be one voice contributing to a larger discussion that I'm happy to be a part of. And that alone is enough. So you don't need to be the best at anything, although being that is great, right? If you achieve that status, but just let go of that. I'm just here to be one voice. The way we are in the classroom, I'm just here to lead this set of students this semester to a better understanding, and just having a more, just a realistic idea of who my audience is and who I'm striving to reach. And then finally, I'll say that as a scholar who's underrepresented within higher ed, it really took me a long time to embrace the fact that I have the right, R-I-G-H-T, to write, especially, it's just was hard to make professional writer an aspect of my identity and who I see myself as in the world. I'm very comfortable viewing myself as a teacher and always felt very strong in that. It was a long journey for me to also embrace, yeah, I'm a professional writer, and I'm here to engage with the community of scholars, and my ideas deserve to be out there.
What's some practical writing advice that a good first reader or a mentor or a colleague has offered you before that's really helped you, whether when you're first starting out or even just now?
I have continued to draw from a very powerful dissertation writing workshop that I attended in graduate school in the 90s that was led by Dorothy Duff Brown. She's a writing coach. I've held on to her advice for so long, and there's a couple pieces of this. One is to remember to separate what are the A tasks from the B tasks and know when you should work on which. So the A tasks are the ones that take the most mental effort, focus, and energy. So that could be generating new text for the first time, working on substantial revisions once you get that feedback, maybe focusing on very critical readings for your literature review or the other scholarship that you're engaging with. And then also within this, even though I say generating new text and making revisions, it's also important to separate generating new text and editing your drafts as two separate parts of the process, and to not try to do them at the same time. Those are two very different A tasks. The B tasks are those that push your project forward but require much less effort and focus. So that might be updating your references, tracking down new readings, that you discovered in today's reading, making minor grammar, spelling edits, those kinds of things that you can do when you're not at your most focused and brightest. And so there's another academic writing coach by the name of Kathy Mazak who suggests that you know and honor what she calls your tiger time, right? Which is the times of day and days of the week when you can really be most focused. For me, I'm a morning person. I like to get up, I have coffee, and I immediately get to writing, because if I don't do that first thing in the morning, it's not going to get done any other time of day. Other people are opposite, right? They're night owls, and it takes them a long time to get warmed up, to get focused, and then by 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the evening, that's when they're ready to, I guess, have the eye of the tiger and buckle down and do that really tough work. And another piece that comes from Dorothy Duff Brown is to just pace yourself. And she would advise working in 45-minute segments. I know some people prescribe or subscribe to the idea of the Pomodoro technique, which is 25-minute segments. I find that personally a little too short. I like 45 minutes, but there's a scientific basis for this, I believe. 45 minutes is about the limit of our attention spans when our brains can really focus best and most. After 45 minutes, you're supposed to get up, make a cup of tea, get some fresh air, right? The break is not, checking email or logging onto social media. It's really stepping away from your computer or your pen and paper, if that's what you're using, refresh yourself, and then come back and do another 45-minute segment. And something that was really important that I learned from her was that if you do 3 or 4 of these segments in a day, that was an amazing writing day, pat yourself on the back, call it quits or like work on something else, but it doesn't get any better than that. I think sometimes we have unrealistic expectations of, especially in the summertime, it's summer, and right, I have all week 40 hours to just focus only on the writing, and that's physiologically unsustainable and not even enjoyable, right? And that also pushes us away from enjoying the time that we're there to focus. Related to this too is what some people think of as like a weightlifting principle. If you create a schedule for yourself for the week and then say one day you fall through, then the following day you're like, I'm going to do yesterday's tasks and today's, right? And if you're a weightlifter, you don't keep adding on more and more weights every single day. Your body can't sustain that. So the same thing with planning out your steps of writing. It's like if you didn't get something done on a particular day, like that's the focus for the next day. And then you have to adjust your timeline and schedule beyond that. So always adding in more cushion time than you think, but just not expecting yourself to be some writing machine that's going to focus, for untold hours. Sitting there, it's not even good for you.
When you're working on a longer term project, how do you keep your momentum going or hold yourself accountable to maintaining those goals?
That's probably been one of my biggest challenges, because I work in a field where it's not necessarily as common to collaborate with co-authors. I have started moving in that direction, which has been really great, because I find that wanting to preserve the respect of colleagues whom I really respect and admire and enjoy working with, that's one of my biggest motivations to like get done what I promised them I was going to get done on my end of our joint work. But when I'm working on a project alone, it's much harder to hold myself accountable, because especially when you're teaching takes as much time as you allow it to. And also the challenge for me personally as an extrovert is I get so much more immediate feedback from teaching, and then you see the students excited and happy, and you walk away feeling like I made a difference for someone today. Whereas when you're writing, it's like I may as well be an astronaut cut off from my ship in outer space, and like who's ever going to read this and care, and what am I doing all by myself with this laptop? So what has helped me is trying to make the writing more social. So that means talking out my ideas with other people, really trying to state what my goals are for the week. I actually even do this with my husband, even though he is not an academic, he works in tech, but each day I just like to tell him, you know what, today I'm focusing on my conclusion. And he doesn't even know what I'm writing about per se, but I just like saying it aloud to someone. Then another thing that helps me is really tracking my progress. Sometimes that's in the minutes I spent per day. That's usually how I do it. For some folks, it might be the word count that you're striving for. And then I think it's Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, has an encouragement about not breaking the chain, right? So on your calendar, if you put an X for every day that you wrote or did something for your project, seeing that string of X's get longer and longer as the days and weeks go on also becomes your motivation to like, today's not going to be the day that I break the chain, right? For him, that's writing one joke per day, not wanting to break that chain. And then, I also schedule in rewards for meeting my mini goals. And I was going to say, I don't know, I feel very vulnerable admitting this, and it's going to be on YouTube, who knows who's going to see it. But for me, like jewelry is a big thing. And I just think to myself, okay, once I submit this to the journal, hey, I'm going to click on purchase that pair of earrings that I had an eye on, or whatever. Just whatever is a small reward or treat for you. Just holding out to be like, okay, this is the carrot that I'm placing ahead of me to get this work done. And I guess I'm remembering something I wanted to share earlier that comes from Donald Hall. And it's just about like finding the meaning in the day-to-day process. You have to find that, because there's no guarantee that your piece will ever see its way to print. Just like there's no guarantee that you're going to get tenure, right, when you're pre-tenure. And so it feels very scary, and it's a lot of pressure when those things are out of your control, but they were never in your control. What is something you can control is where you're choosing to place your energies each day, and the meaning you find in just the day-to-day pushing yourself to do the things that are personally fulfilling and meaning for you. And other folks' approval can't determine that for you, because you can't control what they think. You're not going to guarantee their acceptance. So you have to find that within yourself and let that inform your motivation to write, to put your ideas out there, to be vulnerable. It's hard to share your work and to open it up for feedback. especially when you're writing about topics that are very meaningful to you. It feels like the feedback on your piece is actually feedback about you as a person, and it's critique of me and who I am. And it's taken me a long time to really let go of that idea and to say, you know what, this feedback is pretty tough, but it's helping me strengthen my piece, and that's worth it. And I'm glad I put it out there. So as more time has gone on, it's become easier for me to just let go of my work, put it out in the world, accept it for not being perfect, not hanging on to it too long. That's been the best part of my writing journey, is writing each day, showing it to a trusted colleague to say, hey, can you give me some quick feedback before I send it to the journal or whatever. That's been really rewarding, and it's helped me to enjoy the writing process more. And one final thing I'll say is I got into the professor biz because, in part, I really used to enjoy writing. And I think just the terror and uncertainty of the tenure track for a long time divorced me of that love of writing. And I'm lucky to have made it through, with a lot of support and also hard work, to have made it to this point of being not only tenured, but now a full professor. And now just having that freedom and really the release of that pressure has opened up a whole new world of writing to me. But I could have accessed that much earlier had I just had encouragement or been thinking more critically about these lessons, and had other people talk to me about the writing process, right? I think for so many of us, we didn't have faculty advisors who necessarily led us through the day-to-day, like what it is like to be a professional writer who's also teaching and also doing university leadership. And I think if we open up more and talk more candidly about that, people behind us in the pipeline will just have an easier time. And that's how it should be, right? This shouldn't be about academic hazing. But I think it's important to have exactly these conversations that you're providing through this series.
Thank you so much for these wonderful insights and offering this mentorship to our listeners and to our audience here at San Jose State and beyond. This has been a fabulous introduction to our series. Thank you.
Thanks.